The G20 summit is wrapping up in New Delhi. India is seeking to voice concerns during its year-long presidency of low-income countries, also known as the Global South. Voice of America's Jessica Stone is on the ground there. She joins us now live. Jessica, since Indonesia hosted the G20, the process of reaching consensus as the final statements between all of these leaders has been increasingly difficult due to a divide of the war in Ukraine. But in New Delhi, India, the declaration came out early and also with unanimous support. How did this happen?
Well, it certainly looks from the outside that they removed a key obstacle, which was coming to agreement on softening the language around the war in Ukraine. For example, instead of the war against Ukraine, the language in the final statement says the war in Ukraine, which leaves some doubt or some gray area as to who is the aggressor here. If you remember in the Bali Declaration, the G20 leaders all called out Russia's aggression and blamed Russia for the war in Ukraine. There is no mention actually at all of Russia or Russia's aggression in this communique. Now, in the United States, this is seen as a huge concession. Of course, the United States, one of the key leading voices that wanted universal condemnation of what's going on in Ukraine. And not only the war itself, but the knock-on effects, the economic impacts around the world, the oil shocks, the price of grain going up, and the global inflationary impacts, particularly to the global South. But this does come after the United States and Secretary of State Antony Blinken to the Ukraine, just on his way, really, to India to offer $1 billion in aid. And now we see that today the foreign minister of Japan is making a surprise visit to Ukraine to offer its economic development resources. So it is the case that Zelensky himself, the president of Ukraine, was not invited. The Ukrainians are incredibly disappointed with the outcome. They say, quote, "There is nothing to be proud of here."
All right. Jessica, as far as we know, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is also in India for a state visit after the G20. He was also a part of an announcement during the G20 of a major infrastructure investment between Saudi Arabia, India, Europe, and also the United States. What more can you tell us about this deal?
Yeah, this is an incredibly ambitious proposal that was actually signed on in the form of a memorandum of understanding between the UAE, the Saudis, the Indians, the Americans, and the Europeans. They all signed that memorandum of understanding last night here in New Delhi after announcing what is a rail and shipping lane project that will link Europe through the Middle East to India. So we're talking about, in some cases, a recreation of old trade routes, in some cases, a repurposing of trade routes, and additional rail will need to be linked. I understand from one of my Indian ambassador sources who told me that this really started off in India with the I2U2 meetings in which they discussed increasing connectivity between these parts of the world. And it has been backed fully as well by the United States. We saw that meeting in May between the 4 national security advisors involved here, getting this off the ground. And there's still a long way to go. We still have no idea how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, what kind of combination of private and public resources will come to bear. But it's announced in the spirit of creating sustainable art infrastructure opportunities and also countering China's Belt and Road Initiative. We know that China's economy has been downgrading and has been slowing. And so it's very possible that the BRI will be slowing as well. This is an opportunity, Americans say, to offer the world an additional method of funding these types of infrastructure projects, a more transparent, less coercive method, White House officials argue. And most importantly, perhaps for the consumer, it will reduce the time. It has the potential to reduce the time for products to come to India. For example, the current method of transportation takes about 18 days at the outset. This would cut that nearly in half. So it could be a very impressive achievement if it all comes to bear. As we say, we don't know the details fully yet, but a very ambitious proposal nonetheless.
Right. Jessica, we've also received words that President Joe Biden is already en route to Vietnam for a strategic visit to the region. What's he looking to accomplish there? And how does it build from the momentum of the G20 that he was just attending?
So he's due to touch down really in the next couple of hours in Vietnam, and he will be meeting with the Chief Communist Party leader for much of the visit. It's a 2-day visit in which we're expecting the U.S. and Vietnam to upgrade their ties either to comprehensive or the strategic level, the comprehensive strategic level or the strategic level. So an elevation of ties between the United States and Vietnam is going to be announced. Hanoi is really looking to hedge against China, as we've talked about. A number of the Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia, want more options for trade and security guarantees in the region. Vietnam is no different. For Washington, this is also a key way to help diversify, I should say, supply chains. Now, certainly that's not going to happen overnight. A number of the would-be partners in Vietnam are Chinese-owned or Chinese-linked in any case. But it is an opportunity to move some of the production out of China, maybe make these supply chains more resilient. We know that Google, Intel, and Boeing CEOs or executives, I should say, are all also attending meetings in Vietnam during this visit with Secretary Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State. This also gives an opportunity for the United States to have another partner in the Taiwan contingency. That continues to be a real focus of and a real motivator for U.S. engagement in the region, as well as having more security cooperation in the South China Sea, which of course is a major global shipping lane area.
Right, our VOA correspondent Jessica Stone there live from New Delhi, India. Jessica, thank you very much for the report.